Test, test. All right. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. You can finally hear me now. What I was saying there, while you couldn't hear me, was you can't hear me. Um, Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning on the Coffee Break Chat. I'm your host, James Jackson. He, they pronouns. Executive producer, Light Beef Productions. We've got a good show for you today. Let me fix up one little thing before we get started. Uh, Technically, here on my end, I didn't fix my cameras. So anyway, we've got a pretty good show for you this morning. We are getting started just a few minutes late here. We were having a technical difficulty with my camera, and it's been an interesting morning. um, Today we got a number of numbers for you, and let's go over them. Let's see, 12,000 queries, or 1,200 queries, 10,000 layoffs, 30,573 lies, and $75,000 in tax hike. Um, what does that all mean? 12,000 queries, that's the number of queries that Elon Musk says are unnecessary on the Twitter mainstream. Um, Twitter uses queries to contact its database, and Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, decided that, you know what, we don't really need to do all that. Anyway, now I don't know why he's an idiot, but whatever. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We've got 10,000 layoffs. There's another round of layoffs. That's been announced from a major tech firm. This one is from Amazon. They're about to lay off 10,000 workers right before Christmas. Yay! Merry Christmas, everybody! Happy holidays! The real war on Christmas is these folks that just lay off people right before Christmas. 30,573 lies. One Mr. Donald J. Trump decided to announce that he will be seeking election as the President of the United States for a second term. That's right, folks. He hasn't been the president for the last 2 years. So he announced that he's going to be seeking re-election. The timing, coincidentally, is seems to be pretty early. Most presidential bids are announced within a year and a half of the actual event, and to avoid prosecution, because some folks are ready to indict him, and he can't be indicted. If he's a presidential candidate, just by tradition. There's no law against it, but there's a tradition that the DOJ doesn't go after presidential candidates. I don't know why. That doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, what else we got for you? This morning we have the $75,000 tax hike. If you make $75,000 or less. That's right, $75,000 or less. Most people, like 90 some percent of the people in the country, make $90,000 or less. If you make $90,000 or $75,000 or less, you now, according to Mr. Trump, will owe more money because they set up a tax hike to automatically go into effect in 2021, and continuing through 2022, etc., all the way up to 2024, which will gradually raise the taxes on anybody making under $75,000 a year. This tax hike does not hit higher incomes. It only hits those under $75,000 a year. And so when you see your tax bill increase, don't thank Joe, thank Trump. Anyway, we've got a great guest for you this morning. We've got one Mr. Ryk Lewis. Give me a second. I'm gonna pull him up on screen if I've got my settings right here. I don't. Hang on. Let me pin you to the second screen there, my friend. All right. Ryk, welcome on screen. Introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Ryk Lewis. My pronouns are I, am, he, him. I'm a theater professional, which means I do everything from directing to producing to writing to sweeping floors. Um, I'm also a local politician over here in Burlington County. So mostly I consider myself an artist activist.
Awesome. Um, and I have you on today as also a political expert because you're one of the more politically active people that I know. Um, you wait, did you have something coming up? You did have something coming up, right?
No.
No.
In May, I was reelected as a Burlington County Democratic Committee rep, and I am currently the Medford Lakes Democratic Municipal Chair, although I'm going to be stepping down from that and handing it off to somebody who likes the Democratic Party a bit more than I do.
I see.
And we can talk about that if you want.
Sure. No. Explain, please. Elucidate.
So there's the ideological concept of parties that we have. I talk to people a lot, and I say, okay, if you look at the Republican Party and you look at the Democratic Party in leadership and in rank and file, which looks more like the demographic of America? And like it's not even close. Like the GOP is like 91% white, and then all of the other ethnic minorities in the country make up like 9% of the GOP. So like it's not even close. And the Democratic Party is still a bit skewed, but it looks much more like the diverse demographic of the country. That being said, there are still ways of operating politically when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to corporate deference. There are still ways that both political parties operate similarly, because while ideologically they're very different and diversity they're very different, as far as how they operate as businesses, it's an industry. Like politics is an industry, and so there's ways that they work similarly. So I'm very much a social activist. I'm very much um, into trying to make the country a better place for all of us. Um, Sometimes that works in the machine because the machine is how we get things done. Sometimes it doesn't. So I have other people who I know and who I trust who are more dedicated, I guess, to the mechanics than I am. So I'm gonna like let them do more of their mechanics stuff while I can focus more time and energy on some of the ground and grassroots and interaction with people stuff that I actually enjoy.
Awesome. I had to mute my.
That's the short version.
Well, I mean, it's a good.
Now I can't hear you.
Sorry, it's a good short version. Yeah, I'm trying to fix an echo. For some reason, you have an echo. I see you here on the back end coming through my external microphone for some reason. So I need to fix that. But I will fix that as I talk to you. Anyway, yeah. All right. So the interesting thing about everything that we you just introduced is the results of the just passed midterm elections. Some factoids, usually midterm elections are not well participated in. folks don't really pay much attention to the midterm elections. So it's usually a time when voter turnout is low. There's less participation, less folks, actually doing anything with regards to really tracking candidates, really caring what happens, etc. Um, and this past midterm elections, there was quite a lot of participation. Voting was up on um, a number of categories. The highest the highest number of voters in states like Pennsylvania, there was an additional 50% turnout um, over previous midterm elections. So yeah, a very interesting stuff. Um, I don't know how that happens exactly, but
Well, in my opinion, the Republican Party, um, in the past two midterms, has managed to quite effectively screw itself. And yay, I'm glad. In 2018 was the highest voter turnout in 60 years up until 2022. So Trump and all of his ilk and all of the things that the Republican Party was showing itself to be drove high voter turnout. Things like Tom MacArthur trying to introduce his healthcare plan that was basically the anti-Obamacare healthcare plan. Like there's a lot of things that were going on, and people are like, fuck this Trump guy. And so that drove high turnout. With the pandemic and the economy being what it was and inflation being what it was and all of those sorts of things, all of the things that would typically drive um, the party in presidential power losing seats, like Biden was primed to get shelled. Um, Fortunately, and that's a really sort of backwards term. Like I know why the Republican Party did things like drive to have Roe v. Wade overturned. I know why the Republican Party has been the obstructionist party that it's been. So, from the strategic standpoint and from trying to gin up their base and trying to solidify kind of white male Protestant supremacy, which is at home in the GOP right now. But in doing that, they energized more people against them than they did for them. And so doing those sorts of things kind of gave that political momentum that we hadn't seen before 2018, gave it sort of another round in 2022. What will be interesting to see is if this historical, and it is historical, that the Dems didn't lose more seats and that they retained control of Senate in like a midterm, like it doesn't happen. It's never happened. So that historical victory, essentially, it'll be interesting to see if that turns into um, real legislation and real movement forward now that kind of the MAGA movement has kind of been rebuffed.
so um, stand by. Hold on one second. Sorry, I messed up your. I'm doing all kinds of things this morning. I'm having a rough morning.
It's 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 that kind of a day.
Yeah. Anyway, let me pin you on the first screen and pin you on the second screen here while I talk, and then also I'll talk and comment and also try and do technical things all at the same time. This is the fun part about self-producing. If you're ever thinking about self-producing, folks, just don't. Rick knows this. I know this.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should just yeah. Anyway. Yeah, the so a lot of folks are arguing over, exactly what details, like what these details are, what is bringing the what is bringing the people to vote, for Democrat candidates, etc. Like there's always this post analysis in politics, in especially in national politics, and you have the DNC machine. Like the DNC is a national organization. It's who runs our presidential campaigns as far as candidates, and they also select local Democratic candidates and statewide Democratic candidates. The DNC, the folks who are there, they have their opinions, and they've been running campaigns for, forever. But I feel like sometimes they're a little out of touch. Am I mistaken here? Like, I feel like we don't really hear like what you and I talk about as issues, from the folks that are at the DNC, that create the national narrative as far as politics goes.
I think they're very out of touch. The DNC wanted Connor Lamb to run for Senate in Pennsylvania instead of John Fetterman. Fortunately, from the bottom up, there were more people who were interested in John Fetterman in the primary and who saw Connor Lamb as that moderate, sitting on the fence, almost Republican kind of dude, and were like, fuck that. In general, it's like, okay, so the DNC, their purpose is to win. Their purpose is to win, and that doesn't necessarily come from a policy standpoint. There were, so if you look at like Tim Ryan in Ohio, they figured that he couldn't win, so they didn't put any money behind him. They didn't back him. They didn't want John Fetterman to win in Pennsylvania, but once he got the nomination, and knowing that Pennsylvania is such a crucial presidential stronghold, then they started putting money behind Fetterman and started showing up for him and started coming to his events. So in a lot of ways, like I look at the DNC and I'm like, okay, you care more about winning than you do about whether or not people have health care or whether or not people, can pay for gas and all of those sorts of things. And I don't fault them for that. I fault them for pretending that they care in certain places in order to win, if that makes any sense. But I think that the thing that drove lots of people coming out, if you look at, Arizona, like people came out for Mark Kelly, or or in the other, the governor's race, people came out against Carrie Lake. In Pennsylvania, people came out for John Fetterman or against Oz. So it becomes a lot more personal and a lot more local, I think, is what happened this time around. Not very much about, some sort of overall, Biden's plan or Biden's presidency even, or some overall Democratic mindset, as much as even in places like Kansas, where they had earlier in the year, they had the vote on abortion rights in Kansas. Same thing happened in Kentucky just now. It's like in Kentucky, Rand Paul was reelected, but Kentucky overwhelmingly said, we won't have an abortion ban. So the things that wind up driving people to the polls, I think, are things that wind up being much more personal and much more local and much less Washington driven.
I also think that there's a big misunderstanding between like folks that are you know democratic you know what I don't even know what the word is that I'm looking for. The folks that plan out this stuff. I think there's a gap between folks that analyze election results, analyze turnout, analyze numbers, and the folks that are actually voting. I think there's a huge gap, and I think that's a big problem. The the DNC and Democratic National Committee and Democrats that are pragmatic, like say the Clintons or Biden, they seem to avoid, having these what like what the Republicans would call identity politics issues. Like they tend to avoid, oh, we're not going to talk directly about Roe v. Wade. We're going to talk around the issue. We're not going to draw out the fact that the Roe v. Wade decision wasn't about abortion, and we're not going to draw out the hypocrisy of the Republican candidate until you get relatively independent candidates like Fetterman. Fetterman has always been a relatively independent candidate. He doesn't follow the party line, and oftentimes when he gets advised to not say or do certain things, he just does them anyway. But
sometimes because he was advised not to.
Right. But that's the kind of candidate that the Democrats always shy away from. I don't understand that, though. That's the kind of candidate that gets turnout. Like, that's the kind of candidate it seems like people want to vote for. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, am I dreaming here? Like,
no. I mean, so look at a Fetterman or look at an AOC. I like, even if you look at like Stacey Abrams, I don't think Stacey Abrams would be the darling that she is was she not able to have the effect in Georgia that she had, very much in the same way that Fetterman got backing once Pennsylvania was in play like that. The strategy again, so there's this weird balance. Like the person in Congress who has gotten more money from the insurance industry than anyone else is Chuck Schumer. So Chuck's not gonna Chuck's not gonna openly back any candidates who are pushing for Medicare for all. Let's just draw it down, because the concept of Medicare for all completely screws over the insurance industry. So if the insurance industry is backing your campaign and backing your reelection and backing, and putting money in your pocket, basically, then if that's your interest and you can appease the insurance industry and still manage to vilify the GOP and vilify Mitch McConnell and whoever else so that you can win elections, then that's what the DNC and the DCCC are going to ride. What has to happen is people need to stay involved, so that more and more and more candidates who are seeking to do the right things, who are seeking to not follow the party line, who are seeking to fight for people, eventually begins to shift that balance of power in Congress. And honestly, that's going to be like another 15, 20 years out. But people like,
do you think it ever happens though? Like, do you think it ever really happens? Like, without strong, campaign finance reform or term limits or something. There's a lot of things that people propose to resolve this very problem. Like there's campaign finance reform, which will never really happen because you're telling people, oh, you need to get elected, but at a handicap because now you're going to have to handicap yourself by not taking money. You need to raise, I forget what it is. It's like $10,000 a day you need to raise to be a state level candidate during your campaign. And how do you do that without, nobody's going to pass laws that hamper them from collecting that money to run for office because then they never get elected. So
I think, well, first of all, I believe that the arc of humanity trends upward.
Yes, you you believe in humanity. Oftentimes I don't. I'm sorry.
No. That's the pragmatism like works with the optimism. They work hand in hand. I think a couple of things are going to happen. One, like I said, 40 years ago, an AOC never would have been elected. 40 years ago, a Fetterman never would have been elected.
You don't think so?
No.
Not by the DNC. I definitely think not by the DNC. I think an RNC candidate that's a Fetterman would be elected.
Think you got to think like 40 years ago was like the Tip O'Neill, Newt Gingrich era. Still big fat
the start of the Tea Party. Yeah.
I don't think Fetterman could have pulled it off. Unless he was a lot more biased and violent than he actually is. But anyway, so all of this is saying, a bunch of the, like at some point in time, Schumer, Nancy, Chuck Grassley, Mitch McConnell, they will all be dead.
Yeah.
And they will all go away. And so the next round of leaders, while they will take some pages from their book, it's a slightly different world. You're right. Congress will never have term limits because Congress has to vote on term limits in order for them to have term limits, and that will never happen. Things like campaign finance reform, what will start to happen is, and Bernie kind of kicked this off, and it almost got traction with his whole average of $27 contribution. That was huge because what it showed was that a major campaign can happen with normal people level contributions. And while it was the first one of that ilk, it won't be the last. And that's why I say it's going to take another 15 or 20 years. But eventually, what I think will happen is corporate backing will become a liability. I think eventually people are going to look and say, okay, prescription drug prices are absolutely out of hand. You're taking money from that prescription drug company. How the fuck am I going to vote for you?
Right. Well, I think people are already saying that, but I don't think that I don't think that it gets through. Like I don't think the message that I think that's another area where we have this giant gap between the actual voting population and the wonks who decide what the platform's going to be.
Which and I'll just say this outright. This is part of why, like, I'm still a committee rep, but I don't want to be the municipal chair because that even happens on a local level. Even as far as who's on the ballot and where they appear on the ballot, which is why I got involved in local politics in the first place. But as all of the other changes that happen in American politics start from the bottom up, That's where it's going to happen. Where it's going to happen on a local level, where it's going to happen on a state level, and it's going to take a while before that gets to a national level, like a congressional level. But I think, like you said, like it's starting to happen. It's just going to take a while. And I think what happens a lot of times politically is voters are thinking like what's happening now and what's going to happen in like the next year or two, as opposed to looking at the long game, which I'll say it, GOP strategists were much better at this than Democratic strategists have been. Looking at the
Starting
long
with the
game,
aforementioned Newt Gingrich.
right, exactly. Like, and the whole Tea Party, moral minority, that whole thing that started in the 80s, was shooting for now. Like they were playing a 40-50 year game, as opposed to Democrats, which tend to play like an 8 to 10 year game max. We tend to be a lot more short-sighted. Um, but I do think that it's happening. I do think that people are starting to realize, A, that a lot of politicians are corporate bought, but B, that voters can actually affect who does wind up in office.
I mean, it's the dream, right? It's the dream of democracy to, like the voters, the people actually have the say, etc. I don't know. I'm very pessimistic about this. I'm pessimistic that it will, like we've approached this change several times. We've tried to be better about this several different ways, and then it always gets co-opted by bigger interests. Like the Tea Party. Like I wasn't a huge like rah rah Tea Party person in the late '90s,
I'm glad.
but I looked at the Tea Party and I said, you know what, this is cool. This is great. Like you have people who are expressing real and personal opinions, and representing the passionate real views of people who they are representing. Like they're talking. I mean, I don't know if you remember, or any of our viewers, and there's some of our viewers. I know you guys are like way younger than us, and so like we're talking about stuff that happened before you were born. But if you don't remember, the Tea Party when it started was people like Ted Cruz when he started. Like Ted Cruz was actually an interesting candidate when he first started. When he first started, he was like, "Hey, I'm just this regular guy. I have worked, in I forget what he worked in, but he worked a regular job, and he was a regular guy, and he just had, you know, he's slightly conservative. Like this is what they did with all these Tea Party candidates. They made them they're slightly conservative, but they're hip. They understand modern technology. They understand modern needs, etc. And then, but then, like they get it into the national level, and there's a lot of like conspiracy. Oh, what does Trump have on these people, etc. Like when you get like somebody like Ted Cruz, or you get like Lindsey Graham, like going all in for Trump, and like even after being bad mouthed on the national stage, by the same person that they're now giving kudos to. I don't think that they have anything on these guys. I think that these guys just, like they get into power, and then they think, oh, how can I maintain that level of lifestyle? I don't know.
I think um so I coined this phrase. I call it white male Protestant supremacy. And it's been a part of our country since before we were a country. From Native American slaughter to like the Salem witch burnings to slavery and so it's been this continual thread. And it's only been about the last 30 years that white male Protestant supremacy has had to fight for its political and social relevance. And you know, a lot of things that were socially and politically acceptable, or the norm, about 35 years ago, actually other white people started saying, hey, it's not cool for you to be racist. It's not cool for you to be xenophobic. It's not cool for you to be, homophobic, et cetera, et cetera. But to a large swath of the American public, that Rockwellian mythology is what America is. So you get people like Cruz, Sarah Palin, Lindsey Graham, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene are extreme examples of that, who look at what they think America is and what they've always believed America is. And, since World War II, America is the cowboys with the white hats to the whole world. And so when you see that starting to be threatened as the country becomes more brown, more queer, more atheist, there winds up being this, like, people like Graham and people like Trump and all of those, I see them as byproducts of white male Protestant supremacy fighting for its life.
Right, because they look at somebody like Trump, who's every poor guy's idea of a rich guy, and they go, hey, he's succeeding, even though he's not really. But that's a longer conversation.
All right.
How do you? But the image is he's successful, he's wealthy, he's he's shoots from the hip. The shoots from the hip part is what they identify with, and they can self actualize with. And I say they. I shouldn't say they. Everybody can. Everybody. Like when they see. If you're a person who feels at any moment a lack of ability to exert your own power, and you see somebody like Trump get up on TV and just quote unquote say it like it is
and get away with
it, anybody can feel a little bit of catharsis from that. There's characters in Greek theater that are exactly that. They're designed, and I will go ahead and say that I don't know who writes Trump, but whoever writes Trump is a fucking genius and should be writing, fiction, because there are characters that are written like this, and I think that I don't know if it's Trump himself that writes Trump, but you can't write a character any better than this if you want to win over an audience and then heel turn them. That's exactly what he did. He did the WWE thing that they've done over and over and over again. It's a formulaic thing. You create this character, you make them, you find what aspects of them resonate with the mass, the regular population, and then you hold on to that feeling of empathy while you do whatever it is, that's negative.
The question is, does the WWE manipulate the audience, or does the WWE satisfy the audience?
Yes.
But
both.
Right. Because when I look at Trump, and I say this all the time, and some people think I'm crazy. I don't think that Trump didn't create white supremacy in America. Trump didn't create racism. Trump didn't create anti-Semitism. Trump didn't create all of those things that people look and point at him and say. All of those things were in place. All of those things existed. And there's a whole bunch of people who were like, don't tell me I have to call that boy a girl. Don't tell me, I have to like treat people da 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 da. So
I don't think it's about having to call a boy a girl.
I put that under a bunch of umbrella things.
I think the umbrella there, and let's call it out for what it is. I think the umbrella is, don't make me learn new things. Don't make me, and at the end of the day, folks have become so embedded in their identity that they can't analyze their own identity and see the spots where they can make simple but fundamental improvements to their own identity and thereby get along with the rest of the society a lot better. I don't know. I think that's what it is. Like, if I think about it, like, I hate the new design of Washington Avenue in Philadelphia. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It's awful. It makes me cringe every time. It takes me 20 minutes to do what is a 5-minute drive. Every single time I have to use that road. And I've been using that road a lot for the past 20 years. Now, every time I use it, I'm actually trying to find other roads that work better. Here's the thing. The changes to Washington Avenue are an improvement. They make the road safer. They mean less deaths. They mean more people can use bicycles. More people can get through there. As an actual whole, it improves travel time because less and less people will use that road. More and more people will use bicycles and mass transit if they need to get from here to there. So my individual story isn't as important, and it's something simple I can just, accept and not fight the fact that, these changes needed to be made. We need improvements to our citywide infrastructure, and things aren't always going to be the same. Things aren't, I can't rely on the fact that I need a personal vehicle. I need to learn new things. I need to learn how I can take mass transit. I need to learn how I can take a bicycle, or when I can take a bicycle, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's that kind of thing. Like, the reaction is to the change, and it's not really a change. We've always needed that. We've always needed that safety. It always would have been better to have been designed differently, but I got used to the way it used to be.
So imagine if you were a slightly less critical thinker, and people told you that using Washington Avenue the way that you've always used it is absolutely wrong and unacceptable.
Right. Well, I do have people telling me that all the time.
But if you are less able to self-examine, it would wind up being more about the criticism and attack.
Right. It's a personal attack at that point.
Than it would be about the actual situation overall. And I think that's a large part of what's happening in America as a whole. And unfortunately, there's two things that happen. Conservative leadership plays up on that and says, see what they're trying to do. They're trying to turn us all I actually had somebody say this to me, that the left is trying to turn us all Marxists and can't tell men from women. And so there are a whole lot of Americans that think that the left is trying to turn us Marxists.
I think that is just an easy line. I think so. No, honestly, I think I've been there before. I've been, in that kind of environment before. I think, like, folks that are progressive and on the left do this too. Like, we go, oh, they're just a bunch of hicks, that don't wanna use the right pronoun.
Or they all want to, or they're all Nazis and they all want
Yeah,
to turn us into Christo-fascists.
right, exactly. It's an easy line, and it's a relatively actually comforting thought, because if you can group everybody that has any sort of disagreement with you into, oh, they're just Nazi Christo fascists. I admit, I'm sorry. I've been guilty of this many times and will continue to be guilty of this many times in the future.
It's a choice then.
I mean, but there is a small group of powerful people who would like to use Christofascism as a tool to get what they want.
Undoubtedly.
And there's another small group of not so powerful people but influential people who are more than happy to take power by using Christofascism as a tool to get what they want. There are very few people that actually believe in Christofascism, that believe that life would be better for them if they had to answer to the state for everything, and that they could only follow the laws of Christianity, that some sort of weird modern non-Christian Christianity that
Take the state part out of it, but there's a few million. There's probably 10 and 12 million people who would absolutely be fine with America being a theocracy,
sure,
being an evangelical theocracy.
right, because they already believe in that, but they believe that is good. Like, they believe, they've been taught, been brought up, and actually, through self-analysis, think, hey, this has been good for me. Like, I know somebody very personally who is a former alcoholic, well, a recovering alcoholic. They are in AA. AA is very embedded in theocracy. It's not a specific theocracy, but it's very clear that it was created by Christians, embedded in modern theocracy.
Higher power, blah blah blah.
Yeah, this person is not what I would call a Christo-fascist. They themselves are always concerned with other people. They're always concerned with how what they say and what they do affects other people. That's why they're a recovering alcoholic, because you could be an alcoholic and just say fuck it, But they're worried. They're worried how it affects their family. They're worried how it affects people that they know, and through Christianity, which they now devoutly follow, but they follow these pastors, and I'll get to that in a second. But they follow these pastors who preach a version of Christianity that isn't really Christian, and then but it's done good in their life. It's done good in this person's life. This person has now leads a productive life, whereas when they were an alcoholic, they couldn't get things done. They couldn't get ahead. But now they're starting to retain money and save for their retirement. They're starting to be able to pay their bills every month. They're starting to so this Christianity has been good for them. Well, and then by extension, well, this is good for everybody. So having these rules, having this structure is good for me, therefore it's good for anybody. That's where it gets screwed up. That there's a lot of people, that's where we get into Christofascism. There's a lot of people who don't understand that just because something is good for you, it is not, like the phrase, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, is not true in any sort of way. Like, you put me under a structure like Christofascism or even AA, and I'm going to flip the fuck out. I'm going to do the opposite of whatever you think is good, because I don't work well under structure.
Right. But now, okay, so let's go back to that Rockwellian mythology thing I was talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you think from the time kids are like 4 or 5, God bless America. America, America, God shed his grace on thee. The battle hymn of the Republic, glory, glory, hallelujah. Like God, and it's funny to me when people talk about, how we didn't have all this blending of church and state. And it's like, but they've been singing God bless America since they were in elementary school. So Christianity and government and being an American, the result of God's grace and all of that shit is sewn into our fabric from the time we can sing, from the time we can talk, from the time we go to elementary school. Um, the Pledge of Allegiance, all of that shit. So Americans wind up being brought up so the Christian fascism aspect that wants to institute kind of Sharia type law is something that most people would balk at. But the idea of American being a Christian nation and what that means is on some level instilled in almost every American. So when it comes down to kind of trying to extricate ourselves or separate from that or deal with the part of America, like I said, America is just going to become more atheist. It's going to become more brown. It's going to become more queer. It's going to become more femme. But there's a whole segment of the population that has had all of that stuff, those seeds planted and taken root all of their lives, that as they get older, when they see people like you and I and AOC and the squad, and when they see people that want to fundamentally change what it means to be an American, because being an American no longer means I go to church every Sunday, I pay my taxes, I do my 9 to 5, and I go to vacation 2 weeks out of the year, where everybody looks like me and we all do the same things and we all have the same bowling league. As folks like us start to make that not the default for what it means to be an American, the people for whom that's a default, they don't know what to do.
Well, and let's be clear here. That's never actually been the default.
That's why I call it Rockwellian mythology.
Right. I get worried because like we quantify and qualify these things at the beginning, but by the time we've talked about the truth of it, people then kind of forget the qualifier. I just want to reiterate the qualifier there. It is a mythology. This has never been America. America has never been. I don't know. Maybe.
No, see, but that's not true. Because if you drive out to Lancaster County,
Yeah.
if you drive out to Elkton, Maryland, if you drive out to fucking Chillicothe, Illinois, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what life is.
That's what life is for that part of America. But America has always been an amalgam of hugely different cultures.
Absolutely. But there's a whole bunch of people out in Lancaster County that have absolutely they have no reference. They have no interaction. They have no concept. I did a show last week. The show that I was working at a high school that's just outside of Philadelphia.
Right.
And there were probably 2,400 kids in that school.
Yeah.
I saw 2 black kids.
Yeah.
And so you have these, and that's right outside of Philadelphia. So you have these huge swaths of America that have never touched or seen or interacted with that.
I mean, look, I was the token black kid growing up. I went to rural schools and I talked to my brothers and sisters who lived in Philadelphia their whole life, and I'm like, this is a complete different world. But that's my point, is that these different worlds have always existed. And it's just, if some folks don't realize that. I wanna. Oh, one quick thing back on elections before we just get the last few things out. Um, I think that what interests me is the folks that don't have exposure to other cultures, but voted for, say, for instance, Fetterman because now I've forgotten the other guy's name.
Oz,
Well, okay, not Fetterman. Voted for
Shapiro,
Shapiro because what's the other gubernatorial?
Mastriano,
Mastriano was just beyond the pale for them.
fucking Nazi.
Right. Well, but and the thing was like, people and hey, DNC, if you're listening, you're not, but if you were listening, this is the problem, like, with your candidates. Like, you don't pick candidates who can speak, um, like, a vision of, like, real leadership to these absolutely insane people that run against them.
Yeah.
Like, who are they running against Marjorie Taylor Greene? Who are they actually running? They're not providing enough money to whoever it is. If you have a candidate out there like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who won her first election unopposed, if you have a candidate out there, even if you have a candidate out there like Grassley, who's basically holding a seat so his son can grow up enough to inherit it from him. If you have these people who represent undemocratic, unactual, like, that represent not what the American dream that we sold to people in the 80s and 90s in civics class when we still had civics class. If you don't provide any sort of if you provide any sort of, like, hey, this is a counter to that idea, they get elected. Like, that's why Shapiro got, like, a lot of Republicans voted for Shapiro because they were like, yeah, Mastriano's not an actual gubernatorial candidate. Like, he was actually at the insurrection, like, inside the Capitol. He's not. He talks about things that aren't acceptable to the Constitution. Like, just by constitutional law are unacceptable. Even, like, the vastly simplified version of it that most people understand. Like, his ideas are just anti-constitutional. He straight up on the campaign trail says things that are anti-Semitic. It's not even, like, close to not anti-Semitic. He says things that are anti-Semitic. And those things play great with, like, the 2% of the population that is hyper evangelical Christian who actually believes that we're in the end times, and they want all the Jews back in Israel, and they want a strong Israel because they need the battle of the apocalypse to actually happen. Armageddon to actually happen.
That percentage is bigger than you think, but keep going.
Okay, so 12% of people. Let's give it.
That's a big ass difference.
Let's give them 12. Let's say everybody. Let's say everybody that that is driven to vote is by that is like 12%. It's still 12% of the population. That's not enough. I mean, it is enough to change the course of politics, but it's not.
I'm like, when you have 60% of the voting population voting. Finish your point. I'm sorry.
Point being, Mastriano represented something that even for people who are hyper 2FA, hyper anti-abortion, hyper, and I think especially for the people who are very, like, back the blue, very law and order, we're like, oh no, this guy's not, and it was very easily seen through that he's not law and order, that he's just fucking nuts. And they voted for the only other logical candidate, which is somebody who's actually served the public for a number of years and has a track record of faithfully serving the public. He's Shapiro is not my favorite candidate. He's a
Right.
crap candidate in my book as a progressive. I think he's a horrible, horrible politician. I dislike
And as
him.
far as Back the Blue, like cops are all in his jock.
Right.
Right.
I don't like him at all. But I'm not going to vote Mastriano.
Right.
And that's what the DNC misses all the time, in my opinion. That's what the DNC misses all the time. They miss with this all the time. They didn't have to run a middle ground candidate. They just had to run somebody who has faithfully served the electorate or knows law and constitution well enough and has a base history in what we sold as the dream of modern civics, of a melting pot and an inclusive society.
Right. But now we're back to the DNC has their mindset of how to win. And again, so in Pennsylvania, particularly because Shapiro is essentially from Philly, like Montgomery County, but he's essentially from Philly. So for statewide, yeah, they absolutely thought that they had to run somebody sort of middle ground. Which
and he is middle ground.
Right. And like but they hedge their bets.
Right.
That's what they do.
I don't know. All right. Let's get on to a few more local things that I'd like to talk about. I talked about the Trump tax hike. The MAGA agenda just keeps on going. So if even though we had an election that and one of my subtitles, I had a really long title today for this show. Red Wave meets Blue Dyke.
That's nice.
Yeah, I mean it's not a double entendre either, but it could be. Seriously though, like they're predicting this big red wave. You had basically the Democrats just holding ground, and that turned into, the narrative amongst the wonks was, oh, this is a big upset for the Republican Party. Somebody's gonna,
It was. I'll say it was.
It hasn't slowed them down any, really. The Republican Party, along party lines, the special committee for the return of law and order in Pennsylvania just voted to impeach Krasner. No, and yeah.
I mean,
So a lot of people are like, oh, I'll believe it when he gets removed from, a lot of like anti-Krasner people are commenting, oh, I'll believe it when he gets removed from office. Hey, look, impeaching him was never going to remove him from office because he can drag out the appeals for this
right.
until
Right.
after he's not elected again, or he can just get elected again. Anyway,
Back as far as the red wave thing goes, imagine for a second, not just for the political implications, but imagine the conversations and the feeling in the room if the GOP had impending control of the Senate and the House.
oh no, there would be parties in the street as far as GOP wonks are concerned. They'd be like, all right, we're passing, we're like literally legislating healthcare to be privatized. We're literally legislating. We're dismantling the Department of Ed because the DeVos family really wants all that money. We're going to completely dismantle it within 10 years. Like that would be like goal number 2.
Right.
And they've been saying this since the beginning of like Tea Party politics. They don't want the Fed. They don't want the Department of Ed. They don't want. What are they going to do without the Fed?
thinking about um that's way too long a conversation for today. Um,
But talk about shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, anyway, go ahead.
but even things like, well, we want Roe v. Wade overturned so that it can be delivered to the states, and the states can make their
But
decisions.
no, they would
And
take
then
that back to
states like
federal now.
right, and then states like Kansas are like, oh well, fuck you. And then, well, we want a nationwide ban on abortion. Like
Right.
that flip flop was within 2 months.
Yeah. No, that flip flop was already starting to happen. They were starting to do it just before the election. I think Graham was leading it up, was test ballooning it, if I remember correctly. Lindsey Graham was test ballooning it, and that. Oh, and the blame game now that they didn't win control of the Senate is hilarious. They're passing the buck around between Trump and Graham um and like party leaders are blaming. I forget who else said something publicly that was like it was a test balloon. They were asked to do it by the party. Lindsey Graham's not going to come out with, oh yeah, we would love to have a national abortion ban on his own. Lindsey Graham doesn't do jack shit on his own. He doesn't know.
He doesn't know how.
He doesn't. But then they go and blame Lindsey Graham for the loss of the loss of the election. They didn't lose the election. They still won seats.
Fewer seats though than any other midterm in the last 40 years.
I said this pre-election, and I still hold to it. Although perhaps I can take solace in the fact that the Mastriano loss was a blowout. As far as electoral politics goes, Mastriano lost by a landslide.
Mm-hmm.
He lost by double-digit points, right?
I think like 16 or something like
Yeah,
that.
almost 20 points. Like that's just insanity as far as most electoral politics goes. Um, but this wasn't the blowout necessary to give what some talking heads have tried to turn this election into is some sort of mandate for progressivism.
No.
It wasn't. I mean, it should have been. It could have been. There were a lot of things that could have taken place, especially in House elections. So and for those that aren't as deeply embedded into politics as Rick or I, House elections is where gerrymandering comes into play. The gerrymandering of the local districts, the congressional districts, is what leads to the near even divide of the House of Representatives in Congress. New York's gerrymandering is what really killed the Democratic turnout in House elections because New York got redistricted, and their redistricting was awful for Democratic districts. It basically broke up half of their Democratic districts and made them equally Democratic and Republican. Um, so the New York House race basically killed off a lot of the seats that could have been won, could have been flipped, could have been this and that and the other thing. That's why there wasn't a mandate. But it so the results weren't violently apparent enough that it put even like a momentary pause in all the stuff that the Republican machine has been doing. They're still doing shit that okay, so the governor of Texas just sent 50 people to Philadelphia this morning on a bus. What else happened? We haven't rewritten this Trump tax bill.
We still don't have a Voting Rights Act.
We still don't have a Voting Rights Act. Uh, Trump announced his presidential candidacy. Um,
I'm a little more I'm a little more optimistic about what the elections meant. One of the thermometers I've used, I don't know. I think it happens because there are things about the Democratic Party that I dislike, and I say it openly, but I wind up being able to talk to lots of conservatives. And what winds up happening is I'll have a conversation or a friendship with a relatively sane conservative, but I also wind up interacting with all of their like batshit crazy conservative friends. And so a lot of the conversations that were happening before the election, and a lot of the predictions of the red wave, and a lot of the predictions about, you know, say goodbye, baby killers, and all of those, like really like that thing I said before about Marxists and was an actual quote from an actual conversation with somebody. So I think that those people have been silent for the last week is important. Because while we lost, and again, it's huge. It's ridiculous, huge that we maintain control of the Senate, all things considered. That the margin in the House is what it
and it's so
is also
close that it's actually not decided yet. But I'm not
right.
holding. I'm not one of those people that's gonna, like hold out hope that we actually win the House. But
Right. I don't think that we will either, although it's nice to know that it's a thought. And it's nice to know that even if we lose the House, when it comes down to, because a lot of times it seems like House votes are strictly party line.
mhm.
That's almost never the case. That's probably the case maybe 10% of the time. So it's a whole lot easier when you need to convince 8 or 10 representatives than when you need to convince 20-25 representatives.
And it's also a whole lot easier when you need to convince 8 or 10 House representatives than you need to convince one senator.
Correct. Right. So the considering what was expected, even by normal midterm, numbers, like by normal midterm percentages, we did really well. We didn't do well enough to stop what the GOP is doing, but hell, we had control of the White House and both chambers of Congress when Roe v. Wade got overturned. So they were doing shit even when we had all the keys and were driving the bus.
Well, with
So,
Manchin and Cinema, it's questionable whether we were actually driving the bus, but yeah.
but on paper with numbers. So, um, looking at sort of what's been happening really since 2009, when Mitch kicked in obstruction in its greatest fashion
Mm-hmm.
and publicly said we're going to oppose everything he does, even if it's good for the country. Considering what's happened from then till now, being able to actually kind of pump the brakes on some of that shit a little bit, and not, because if they had won the Senate, then it's no holds barred. Then there not only is their political agenda validated, but so is their social agenda, and there'd be nothing that we could do to stop it. So, in the grand scheme of us not being really fucked for the next 60 years, I think this win was huge. The big question is going to be, okay, now that we like stop the bleeding, can we actually start doing some surgery to fix things? Can we actually start healing things? Are we actually going to start forwarding candidates that people get excited about and vote for. Because like even in 2018, there were very few people that people were excited for. Like in this one, people were excited for Fetterman. People were excited for Mark Kelly. People were excited. Like Warnock is a great example, actually, of people not being excited.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no reason that race should be even close, except for the fact that Warnock doesn't really have a lot to run on, except I'm smarter than Herschel.
Right, and he's, an actual an actual thinking person. Yeah, I mean, and should elections come down to that? No. But also, I don't know. We have a head of lettuce outlasting a head of state. So, um, um,
I think in the grand scheme of things, I think we're probably not in as good a position as I think, but we're probably in a better position than you think.
Probably. I'm not as pessimistic as you make me out to be, but compared to your optimism, I'm pretty pessimistic. I'd like to just go over a few other local things that are happening. So we did that when we did the tax thing. I just want to reiterate that one of the things that us political people need to concentrate on is that yes, prices are going up on things. Yes, gas will come back down again. In fact, it's already doing it because the election is over and the external forces that influence U.S. politics through gas pricing now see no need to keep gas prices high, and they want to sell more of it throughout the winter. Yes, your taxes are going to go up. And no, it's not the fault of anybody that's currently running, and the economy isn't even really under the control of, in general, isn't under the control of people currently in office. A lot of stuff having to do with the economy gets set up 4 to 10 years in advance, and you're now seeing the result of policy decisions that were made in the middle of the Trump presidency, not things that are necessary.
Pre-pandemic, by the way.
Yeah, pre-pandemic. Some actually really great police reform news. The mayor has successfully won an arbitration with FOP Lodge 5, the Philadelphia Police Department union. Yes, I put scare quotes around union for FOP Lodge 5. They're not really a union, neither is any other police union.
They're legalized mob.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm actually honestly really shocked because this is really great reform. The mayor's office has been trying to initiate this policy for a number of years now, basically since the riots. The city now has the right to staff some positions with city employees rather than FOP members. So they don't have to be members of the FOP, and members of the FOP have to be graduates of the police academy. So you don't have to be a police officer to do certain things anymore within the police department. These things are things like body-worn camera technician. These are the guys that take your little GoPro off your vest, transfer the file off of it, erase the card, and give you back your GoPro. Mail delivery duties. Mail delivery duties! Sworn officers in the graphics and audio visual units. There's a graphics and audio visual. There's cops that sit at a computer all day and do what I do. Crime scene investigation unit. Hey, have you ever watched CSI and wondered why the CSIs don't wear uniforms, don't wear police uniforms? It's not because they're cool. It's because they're not cops. They're scientists. Bad scientists, but we can get into that another time. Crime scene unit investigators, again. Firearms examiners. Firearms examiners are literally the people that take the guns in evidence, fire them into a barrel of water, and inspect them for things like gunshot residue and other things like that. It's not a criminal justice position. It's an investigative position. Document and digital evidence examiners. So there's people that are cops, went through police academy, and all they do is sit at a computer all day to read documents and digital evidence.
So like there's two things I think about those. Like I think about like in the military, you have these guys who were like in World War II, you have these guys who were like cartographers, like they made maps, but they all went through boot camp.
Right.
And so it's like, have you shot a weapon? Have you like done the training? Good, you're a soldier. Flip side of that is in this case, you have all of your forensic examiners and your camera examiners and all of the people who are handling evidence have all kind of gone through the pipeline. So it's like they're all part of literally the fraternity.
Right. And the flip side of that is that the guns used in the shooting at the high school, which were in the PPD evidence locker, ended up being sold by a state police officer. By a sheriff's officer.
A deputy sheriff, yeah.
How did a sheriff's officer get a hold of what should be in PPD lockup? Fraternity.
Right. So part of the good thing about this situation is that not everybody who is involved in the process is part of the pipeline. I have a good friend who, oddly enough, was a cop. He was in the military. He was a cop. He was a detective, and he was a CSI. And we've had lots of conversations about the culture and how the culture can, it doesn't always, but it can definitely, depending on the tenor in the room, can take a bad person and make them worse, can take a good person and make them bad. So having situations where somebody doesn't have to worry about, am I ratting out my brother, or am I doing my job? Like having people that don't have to make that decision is ultimately going to be a good thing, as long as the people that are coming in from the outside aren't overwhelmingly affected by the culture into which they're diving.
Right. Which will happen for a number of years, but this is a start. Other things that can go outside the bargaining unit. Public safety enforcement officers. These are folks within the Center City District who, and 5 additional high injury network streets designated by the city, can perform traffic enforcement work to assist in regulating the safe movement of vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles during peak traffic times at accident scenes and in those areas. So basically just like public traffic cops, but not ticketing traffic cops. They're literally traffic wardens, I would say.
What will be interesting about that will be seeing how I'm wondering how much of that is because regular cops don't want to do that.
Oh, no, it's 100% because regular cops don't want to do that. And you know why? Because I have friends that are cops. And you know what they told me? They're told by their FOP reps and by their sergeants and higher ups, don't bother writing traffic tickets because the city doesn't get that money. That money all goes directly to the state, and the state doesn't give it back. So there's no point in the city of Philadelphia cops writing traffic tickets. The only time they write traffic tickets is when it's such an egregious thing that they really,
you can't not.
Right. They want to send a message, hey, don't do this stupid shit again. The other time that they use traffic law is just to randomly stop people. That's it. And
Well,
that's an honest to God direct quote from a cop that I know and am friends with, and he was like, yeah, like we know, like all this argument over whether we can use, these 12 infractions that the Isaiah Thomas bill made illegal is bullshit. I don't care about them. I don't care about those infractions. I'll find another reason to stop somebody if I need to stop them.
right. Or use those infractions because they're really looking for suspended licenses and other shit.
Right. Um, Abandoned vehicle removal. There's a huge backlog of abandoned vehicles, and right now the police department has to go to every one of them to escort the tow vehicle. So, yep, it's gonna, they have more important things to do, so to speak. Through March 31st, 2024, outside the bargaining unit, police department's abandoned vehicle unit may be assigned non-bargaining unit personnel to supplement the police department in that area. And get this, in order to get this really wonderful police reform, we're giving every single police officer a retention bonus of $1,700 before July 31st, 2023. And we'll give them another $1,700. Every police officer will get another $1,700 if they remain employed as of July 1st, 2023. So sometime between now and July 1st of next year, they're going to get $1,700, and then on July 1st, they're going to get another $1,700. So what is that? $3,400?
Just plus their pay just for staying on the job.
Yeah.
Must be nice.
Yeah, it must be nice. And the city will pay a retention bonus in the total of $2,000 for anybody hired after this agreement was reached. So, I mean, whatever. Sure, you're having a hiring. The city of Philadelphia is having a hiring difficulty in the police department. So fine, whatever. Sign-on bonus. Fuck it.
Tell us how you really feel, Jay.
How I really feel is I've been really happy that the FOP is so ineptly led by Hoagie Mouth McNesby that I'm glad they've been sort of defunding themselves. But yeah, I guess, to get police reform, we're going to have to pay them more money because, that's what you do with mobsters who who run your city.
Well, there it is.
You pay them off or you fight a war with them. And to be quite honest, we've got the entire population, and that's still not enough to win a war with an armed mob that actually inhabits the city. Anyway.
That was very diplomatically put.
Anyway, yeah, I did touch on the House Judiciary Committee passing articles of impeachment for Larry Krasner. The House, which is still under Republican control until January, when the new members of the Pennsylvania House are sworn in, and it becomes Democratic controlled. The House, according to Dom Giordano, racist asshole reporter who has a radio talk show, according to him, the House will vote to impeach today. I don't know. They've done things that fast in the past, but there's supposed to be an impeachment hearing today in the House, Pennsylvania House. That would, of course, have to be followed by a trial in the Pennsylvania Senate. That trial could last anywhere from 1 day to 40 months. There's no way of predicting it. Yeah.
Keep going. I'll be right back.
Okay. And then on the off chance that they do vote to impeach that trial in the Senate would then be followed by as many fights in the courts, Pennsylvania courts, as desired. Larry Krasner still has 3 years on his tenure as Philadelphia DA. Even assuming that the House votes to impeach today, he does not lose his office and he's not removed from office unless the trial finds him guilty of whatever crimes they're supposedly impeaching him on. They haven't actually developed what the theory of impeachment is, so I'm curious to see what they actually decide that they're impeaching him for. That'll be interesting news.
The word on the street is that Democrats choose to not prosecute certain criminals. So I think that's the direction that they're going to go.
Yeah, but what's the crime? Like dereliction of duty or
something like
failure to uphold oath or something?
Yeah, like something having to do with like not doing what he's sworn to do or not doing his job because he doesn't prosecute, which is complete and entire horseshit.
Yeah, and even so, it's like much like any other impeachment, they have to be very careful what articles of impeachment they try and bring him up on, because if they try and bring him up on saying that he doesn't do his duty, he can just point to the numbers that, actual case counts are higher under him, actual convictions are higher under him, overturns are lower under him. Like he has way less cases overturned than any previous prosecutor. And the only thing that they can possibly point to refute any of the he's not doing his job stuff is say, oh well, he's had more DAs leave under him than any previous DA.
So very much like the first Trump impeachment, because the first one, let's say the first one was bullshit. So very much like the first Trump impeachment, the concept is much more that him being impeached would make it harder for him to get elected. Him being impeached would also, it was weird how many, like even over here in Jersey, like they tried to tie Andy Kim to Larry Krasner. Which is completely ridiculous. But in the region, so if you have someone who is a powerful Democrat, particularly when crime is your big issue, then you impeach him and it makes it look like you're attacking this guy who's soft on crime, and then you try to tie people to him. Like that's it's much more about the ripple than it is about the pond.
But also let's be clear. Republicans and the RNC in general, and some sort of, I don't even know what the main organizer behind this nationally is, progressive, reform-minded DAs are being prosecuted and attacked like 5 ways to Sunday all across the country. And it doesn't matter how big their district is. It doesn't matter if it's a Philadelphia or a Chicago or a Milwaukee, or there's a small district where the progressive DA candidate just won re-election or won election in Texas, where they re-elected their crap-ass, Senate candidates, but in this district, there's a reform-minded former prosecutor or former defense attorney who ran, had unending arguments with the DA. And she ran as a DA candidate and won election handily. Like it was beyond a joke. It was like 80%, 20%. Like that's a mandate. That's like, and all over the country you have these progressive DAs being elected very handily. Like you have, there was a revolution. Just because the wonks don't recognize it, there was still a revolution. There was a revolution after the summer of 21, or during the summer of 21. And people realized, the people, like regular people, realized that you can't have these policies that just let cops be judge, jury, and executioner.
Correct.
And you can't have these DAs that do nothing but push prosecutions against whoever the cops put in front of them. And that revolution happened. And just because wonks don't recognize it, and just because there's, a drive to impeach or unelect, I don't know, it's like, I don't even know what you want to call it, because you can't unring a bell. These progressive prosecutors are admittedly an experiment, but they're going to be here for a while. This experiment is going to happen. The electorate is sure. We're not unsure. We keep voting them into office by vastly huge numbers, and we're going to keep voting them into office by vastly huge numbers until there's enough data to say, yes, progressive prosecution policies work, or no, they don't. And giving somebody like 1 1/4 terms before you start saying, gun violence in Philly is the worst it's ever been, blah, 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 it must be Krasner's fault, isn't enough data. First of all, it's not true. Second of all, it's not enough data.
But it's enough for some of the people who live in like Northeast Philly.
Oh, it's plenty for people who have always hated the city and lived in the burbs. And, I mean, I can't count the number of times I've read the exact quote, "Oh, I have even less of a reason to ever go back to the city now." You left the city in the first place. Why the fuck do you care? Anyway, sorry. It's mind-boggling to me.
But we're still not actually we still, the city isn't addressing the actual reasons for spikes in crime, like gentrification and urban divestment, and
I think
illegal guns coming into the city.
It is. I think it is, but it's very slow. It takes a lot of time, because the policies that created the current environment where the homicide rate is admittedly the second highest it's ever been. The highest it's ever been is actually 1990, I think. But it's the second highest it's ever been. 1990, by the way, we were under a very law and order. DA would prosecute anyone at the drop of the hat, and had one of the highest clearance rates of homicides, because it was the era of the PPD when they would literally just shove anybody in front of a judge, and they would tell the person that they picked off the street that you're going down for this. You better figure out, you better plea deal it now, because you are going down for this. We will manufacture, like they would literally tell people in the interview room, we will make the evidence that will convict you. Anyway.
Side note, really nice person, really shitty DA.
Yeah.
I knew them personally. Great person, terrible lawyer. Anyway, keep going.
Keep going. Not true, but okay, sure, fine. We're second highest. It's bad, but it takes, these policies are so entrenched. There's parts of the PPD that need to be changed. There's parts of policing in general that need to be changed. There's parts of this
real estate code.
Real estate code. There's realtors that need to be investigated and taken out of the marketplace because they are racist redlining assholes. Um,
One of whom's about to run for mayor.
yeah. Don't remind me. Ugh. There's parts of our justice system that need to be reformed that, like literally the entire time Krasner's been in office, he's been trying to reform and still can't because there's so much pushback against it. Cash bail. It's a problem. Like how you can't enforce different justice systems on people based on whether or not they have any money to their name. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, I could go on and on about this. It's getting late, and I'm sorry I've talked way over our time, but I love hanging out with you and talking with you.
We started late.
We did. We started like 20 minutes late, but anyway. Any last thoughts on any of this? Any thoughts on uh momentarily 10,000 layoffs. There's going to be a lot more layoffs in the tech sector coming up. Don't be scared. It's going to happen. There's been lots of extra money invested in the tech sector, and lots of people who don't actually need jobs there. And then,
It's more like a deflation than a burst.
Right.
It's not like the dot-com burst.
right,
It's much more of a deflation.
right. 30,573 lies. That's the number of lies Trump told, according to fact checkers at the Washington Post over the 4 years of his presidency. So get ready for. I'm gonna go with. What do you think? Do you think it's a exponential increase in lies over the next 2 years, and then the 4 years after that, or do you think just like 30,000 is the most he could do?
No, I think it's a greatest hits album
Oh,
as opposed to releasing new material.
so these 30,573 lies are all of the ones that he's ever going to actually come up with, but now he's going to rehash all of them.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Except he's got to come up with a few more. Like now that he and DeSantis aren't buddies.
Right. Right.
But for the most part, I think he's going to beat the same drum he's beaten. Because it's like the people who have jumped Trump ship
Mm-hmm.
have jumped Trump ship, and the people who are on are going to stay on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he needs to keep those people. I don't think he's going to do anything that's going to make people go, that Trump guy might have something. So I think it's going to be a greatest hits album.
Awesome. I agree with you.
I'm also calling it here. I called it 3 months ago. Liz Cheney's going to switch parties.
Do you think that's a good move?
No.
I
I don't think there's anything good about Liz Cheney at all.
No.
I don't care that she was part of the commission. I don't care. But so many moderate Dems love her because the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
But I'm calling it. She's going to switch parties.
Okay.
As opposed to running as a Republican.
Right. Because they're gonna primary her if she's a Republican.
She couldn't win as a Republican. Yeah. There's no way.
MAGA agenda is still going, so just keep an eye out and keep the work up. The elections did say that we don't want MAGA politics in the U.S., but hey, they're still gonna try it. Everything that they can do before January, when the new the elects become the elected. Any last thoughts on Red Wave meets Blue Dyke?
Unless we start enacting some policy that's not just we're not MAGA, unless we actually start forwarding some policy that we are and some policy that actually hits average Americans, we're going to be having the same fight in 2 years and in 4 years.
Yeah, I know it's a pipe dream, but I'm all with the folks that are like, yeah, let's codify Roe, let's put in the Voting Rights Act, and let's do that as the first two things in January. Let's not even,
Yep.
you know,
Okay.
get your votes lined up now. Let's do it.
I agree.
Um,
And that's only a start,
yeah,
but
no,
at least it's a fucking start.
yeah. And then we can work on things like that really do affect everyone. Like, why don't we make an amendment that codifies privacy rights? That would be great. Let's codify, the access to out of script medicines for a reasonable price, a reasonable markup.
Yeah, but then you have to like deal with senators like Cory Booker who get funded by like SmithKline and Pfizer. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a reason
Yeah.
why Cory Booker didn't do well nationally, and that is it.
That's one of them.
Well,
And
anyway. Any last thoughts? Oh, fact checking. I didn't tell you. Facebook sent out a memo as soon as Trump released his candidacy as public information, Facebook fact checkers are no longer allowed to post fact checks to any of his candidacy posts. So
say that again.
Facebook fact checkers, like sometimes they'll post a little fact check thing on popular posts that are non-factual. They're not allowed to do that to any candidate posts for national elections.
Interesting.
I would do the opposite. I would say that every candidate post
should all be
should be fact checked, but whatever. Okay, Facebook.
But then again, political commercials aren't fact checked either.
They should be. They should have to be. The
FTC,
the FCC should say that all political campaign commercials need to be factual, and they should fact check them, and then fine any campaign that does not release a factual any political ad.
The ones that say I am so and so and I approve this message,
right?
Those have to be factual,
right?
None of the other,
but any campaign thing should have to be factual. Anyway,
should,
or at least not be like, it could be opinion, but it should not be opinion based on non-factual information or foisting non-factual information. Anyway, any last thoughts on police reform?
Kamala Harris is the police.
She is.
And I only say that because, again, from the ground up, with things like progressive DAs and that sort of thing, like that's how police reform is going to happen. Because leadership is too worried about being seen as soft on crime. Leadership is too worried about the optics. And it's going to be from the ground up that reform happens, because that's where it actually touches people's lives. So yay, Krasner. I'd much rather have a Krasner type of DA than a Harris type of DA. And that's how I think police reform is going to occur.
That and things like this. And for what it's worth, a lot of people have lost including me, have lost their entire faith in Kenny ever doing anything good for the city. But I think this reform.
I never had any.
Yeah, and I honestly thought his office, even his people in his office, had really stopped trying to do anything. But this reform bill, it's not even a reform bill. This really actually hard fought arbitration for reform to the police department and the police department budget is really significant and good. And I'm impressed.
I do wonder how much money the police department gets for making these basically civilian concessions.
That was the 1700, and 2000. So every officer gets 3,400.
Okay. All right. So that's significant.
Yeah. Every officer gets 3,400. Every new officer hired gets 2,000. And if they're hired before July 1st, 23, they get an additional 1,700
Right.
because they'll be part of the bargaining unit at that point. Anyway, yay.
Okay. That's all I got.
All right. Thanks so much for hopping on, talking elections with me. I really appreciate it.
Happily.
We need to we'll need to start talking elections apparently again in spring, because even though it's like a year before any actual elections of any value, yeah, we will have the Philly mayor's election coming up. I don't know who's running.
I'm a little bit excited about that.
I really want Ryk to win.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
It,
That would be lovely.
And I'm sure nobody watching has any ability to do this, but I will say it again very publicly. If Rebecca Reihart's campaign contacts me and wants my production company to work on their messaging campaign, I will film stuff for them. You know, I'll be happy to work on that campaign.
That would be fantastic.
She's
that would be as monumental, if not more monumental, than Wilson Good being elected.
Yeah.
That would be like that kind of leap forward.
Ryk, and just for those that don't know what the heck we're talking about, Ryk has been the comptroller of Philadelphia for the past 4 years, I want to say.
Something like that.
Yeah. The comptroller is basically the accountant. And she's done a lot of investigative work into each department and why or why not they're overspending. Well, why? Because all government departments overspend money. Why they're overspending money and how they're overspending money. And with every investigation she does, she makes recommendations based on consultation with other people, with business people and people in the department and stuff like that, on what they could do to eliminate the waste. She would make an excellent mayor. I hope to see her elected.
As do I.
But yeah.
Except I can't vote for her because I live in Jersey. But I can definitely beat that gong.
Maybe if you vote for her, you'll take out some Delco person's vote.
Well, but anyway.
I kid. All right, I'm gonna switch up to me. Thank you for being my guest again today. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna talk us out of the show. And
I'm out.
See you later.
Nicole, let's do this again soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I really appreciate my audience. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you stuck around till now, or you're watching the broadcast in replay till now, I really, really appreciate it. We have had lots of great discussions on this show. And today's topics are pretty important. We try and cover really important stuff every week. Some weeks, we don't get as pertinent information as others, but I think this week we really had a great time. We're going to be off next week for Thanksgiving. I really like Thanksgiving because I like food and I like cooking. I don't celebrate it because of the holiday. I am much more aligned with the indigenous folks, but I do like a good turkey and a good excuse to cook for a lot of people. Anyway, tune back in on the 30th. We will have a show for you on the 30th. We'll have some special guests. We'll have a show on the 7th, and then we'll be off for the rest of the year. On the 7th, we'll have Paper Doll Ensemble and Chris Davis talking One Man Nutcracker. And so on the 30th, we don't have our guests scheduled yet, but tune in on the 30th, catch another coffee break chat. If you like what you see, hit the like button, share it, subscribe, get notifications. Really appreciate it. Share this with your friends. If you want to quote it, best way is to go over to YouTube and find the spot in the timeline that you want to quote, and share that time-stamped link from there. But feel free to share it on Facebook or share it on Twitter. We're there as well. I did notice our Twitter feed tends to get a lot of replay after the fact. So thanks for that, folks. But yeah, assuming Twitter doesn't burn to the ground the rest of the week, feel free to tune in there. And yeah, subscribe to our Twitter feed. Light Thief Productions on Twitter, Light Thief Productions on Facebook, on YouTube is the same. And Light Thief Productions on Patreon. Feel free to support us for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month gets you access to some insider information and upcoming events and stuff like that. So again, tune in on the 30th. Look forward to seeing you there. Have a great week, everybody, this week, and have a great week next week. Enjoy some family time, and hope to see you after the break.